is just fantastic. Captain's Log, Subdates 220307.8. To start this week, I've got an Ensign Spoon purging the plasma injectors with Warrant Officer Crumble. Dorkater is adapting quarters for when Smackers arrives, and Scutterbork is getting a new exhaust installed up his arse, which is then sewn onto his mouth for good measure. In a playlist that has 13 videos and stretches back 3 years, almost at time of recording anyway, we have discussed what has been going on with Shamima Begum. For the sake of what we're going to do today, I highly recommend going through that playlist to best get the context, although I'm sure when we go through what's going on now, I'm more than likely going to allude to a lot of things. If you don't know who she is, that playlist is pretty much for you. And also it means I haven't obsessed over somebody for many years making hundreds of videos. I made 13 in 3 years. Bear in mind I'm a full-time content creator. That's not many videos. So to the first of the updates, we go back to November of last year. Shamima trended on Twitter at least twice. Luckily I managed to archive those so I can give you the context. The first instance was because Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, has introduced a bill quietly, not much attention was given to it, that would give powers to remove British citizenship without any due notice. It should be acknowledged that to do that, the person they're removing the citizenship from must have a citizenship somewhere else. No one can be declared stateless. It is, under international law, illegal. The part of the bill where this is referenced is Clause 9, which is titled Notice of Decision to Deprive a Person of Citizenship, with many critics saying that removing citizenship, much like in the case of Shamima, is already a contentious power, and scrapping the requirement for notice would make the Home Secretary's powers even more draconian. This is how Shamima ties into it, by the way, since she lost her citizenship under Sajid Javid, for being an ISIS bride in the utopia of Rubble Raqqa. The second time she was trending was at the end of November of last year, and the reason why was because she gave an interview to Sky News. During the interview, she said that she had hopes and dreams of coming home, but no plan B if her citizenship was not reinstated, continuing by saying, "I'm willing to fight them in a court of law, but I am not being given a chance," also indicating that her decision to leave the UK as a teenager was not made quickly, and that it was something she thought about for a while, saying, "I didn't hate Britain, I hated my life really. I felt very constricted. And I felt I couldn't live the life that I wanted in the UK as a British woman. I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here, so I would be willing to go to prison for that. But for the accusations against me, I'm just going to have to fight against them." Now, I don't want to be that person, but I do have to point out, you say you felt constricted in the United Kingdom, and I'm sure someone's going to point out here that you then lived as a bride in a war zone under a form of martial law. By chance, would you consider that more constricting or less? There are many debates, on whether or not a diminished responsibility applies to somebody who was groomed, but that has to be proven first, which I think is where the issues arise. But also, the Syrian justice system has to be in effect first, because you were still there, and any crimes you are being charged with apply there. The UK revoked citizenship because they considered her a threat. They consider her a threat now, in fact, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, mostly because governments do like to use optics, and there are no good optics with this. In an article published by The Express on February 15th, 2022, discussions were finally sort of taking place with regards to 2 others that had fled the UK with Shamima. This is the photo in question. Most people spoke about Shamima because she'd had 3 children. All 3 had passed. It can certainly be argued from a more journalistic sense to be more interesting than Khadija Sultan and Amira Abbas. And there's a reason for that. Most people don't really know what's happened to Amira at all. It is believed that she has since passed away. And the same applies to Khadija Sultana, who was believed to have been killed in a Russian airstrike on Raqqa in August of 2016, a mere year after leaving the United Kingdom. So those discussions don't really go very far, do they? The reason we talk about Shamima is because we know she's the only confirmed survivor. The other two schoolgirls are believed to no longer be here. ITV Global Security Editor Rohit Kachru presents a podcast called Shamima Begum: The Blame Game, which looks at the actors involved in Shamima's case and their failures. He appeared on Good Morning Britain, a rather shoddy TV show in the morning, to discuss the show and remarked how Shamima was tuned into UK media so as to better understand public opinion about her. The panel then went on to discuss how Shamima believes she is being demonized and has become the poster child for Britons going to join ISIS, with Mr. Kachu saying we didn't pay attention to many of the key moments along the way, but what we realized was the real gaps were not in what happened but the why, and so what we do here is take closer and honest looks at what the police did and didn't do, what the schools did, what the local authorities haven't done. For example, there hasn't been a serious case review, and we even look at the impact that public perception has had, that journalists have had. This is really a podcast not just about Shamima Begum, but it's about everyone watching at home. It's about me, it's about you, it's about blah 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 blah. Because there are phones inside the camps, there are ways to look at articles, and so it may well be that you've written comments underneath the newspaper article, and it may well be that she has in fact seen it, and it may well in turn have affected her mindset. I do tend to agree that some form of independent review needs to take place to understand why this even happened in the first place. I do agree with that, but there are certain questions that people are still afraid to ask, and they are afraid to ask because they know if they ask those questions they will be accused of something, beginning with R and ending with acism, or I and ending with Islamophobia. And the reason why is because those thought-terminating cliche buzzwords are enough to end a career, which in turn stymies progress. There is a belief that one of the key reasons the UK government will not repatriate Shamima and allow her to come home to stand trial is not because they're afraid of her, but they're more concerned that they will not be able to put her in a prison, i.e. convict and sentence her. And there is some merit to that. Our system is after all renowned for being well and truly balked. So in the interim, what has Shamima been doing? As many of you will know from the last video I did covering Shamima, she has updated her wardrobe and her fashion sense, her tent, her lifestyle, how she appears. How is she doing that? It's very hard to get any money to Camp Sunshine after all. She has taken to a little philanthropy. This in turn allows her to buy Western clothes in an attempt to distance herself from ISIS, give off the appearance of change by throwing off what makes her fit in with the others rather loosely, even though those people hate her anyway, because she showed an ankle and gave an interview. The philanthropy in question is selling food parcels. That came directly from the podcast I earlier referenced, and in messages smuggled out of the camp where she's being held, has been sent to a filmmaker. Shamima has made it clear her despair at being left stateless and describes how she has tried to recover from the trauma of losing 3 children, saying, "I moved on from that part of my life. It no longer makes me feel sad." Currently there is an invasion taking place in a country called Ukraine. I'm sure many of you have heard of it, and many of you have opinions on it, and there will be many questions going forward with regards to it. A recent caller to LBC alluded to the fact that if we want to deal with Putin, we need to revoke the citizenship of the oligarchs who hold European citizenship of some kind, forcing them out of Europe and back into Russia. And this ties into Shamima because of her having her citizenship revoked. It is a little tangent, and there is a lot more to that, but it would take us way off course. So I instead want to get back on course by talking about Shamima Begum: The Blame Game podcast from ITV News. In a recent article with the Financial Times, Fiona Sturgis wrote about her experience from listening to this podcast, how she was initially tempted to switch it off, mostly because while everyone has had their own opinion on the subject, she did not believe there was any point having a podcast that was finger-pointing and adding to the noise. Later conceding because this is her job to listen to, that this podcast offers a more detailed account of the circumstances that led to her departing for Syria than what we know so far. Continuing by pointing out that while Katru, the global security editor at ITV News, had access to archived material, he could have easily made a rather shoddy show from that. There is actually fresh material in it, where the presenter looks at individuals, institutions in a position to intervene, family, school, local council and the police, and how some small oversights had big consequences, such as the letter sent out to parents at Begum's school regarding another pupil who had left to join ISIS a few weeks earlier. Rather than being sent directly, the letter was given to children to pass to the parents. Shamima hid hers in a textbook. The podcast goes on to point out that you can't really lay sole blame on one person, because Shamima's actions were the result of a confluence of events and failures. In the final episode, there was a comment made by Shamima where she said, "I didn't make myself a poster girl. ISIS did not make me a poster girl. The UK made me a poster girl." You don't suppose it's because you're the only one that survived now, do you? The final article I'd like to look at comes from Bedfordshire Live, titled "The Luton Family Who Helped Shamima Begum Escape ISIS," where a family of 12 had a very different fate to that of Shamima. The family in question were actually on holiday in Bangladesh in 2015, and instead of returning home made a detour going into Syria to live in the ISIS caliphate. So what happened to the family? Well, by the end of 2018, 5 had passed away due to both conflict and illness. 7 were still alive and attempting to flee Syria. They then met Shamima, who wanted to leave and come home, so they befriended each other and tried to leave. While Shamima was successful in getting to a refugee camp, where she was then found by Times journalist Anthony Lloyd, who then broke this story, the Manan family, they didn't get so lucky. The remaining members passed away in an airstrike as they tried to leave Baghouz, which is quite unfortunate, but it does add additional context as to how Shamima was able to get to the refugee camp in the first place. It was through that family she was able to. So as we are done with this, I would love to know what you all think. Please do let me know in the comments down below. I shall be hosting a research stream tonight on Moistski Live, and I'll also be streaming on Twitch beforehand. If I don't see you there on either of those channels linked down below, beep. I hope you'll have a fantastic day, and thank you all very much for listening.